I don't want to get too much in the habit of making videos here that are responding to conversations going on in the comments section of my videos. But the comment section, as it happens, is a horrible place to have substantial discussion. So I'm having this conversation with a user named WonderWaz797. First, let me say thank you for your comments. Though we rarely agree on stuff, I appreciate the intelligence and respectful discussion nonetheless. So I'm going to use this video as a format to address what we're discussing, which is genetics and human behavior. Now, WonderWaz is under the impression that the main determining factor in human behavior is cultural, socio-economic conditioning, external factors that shape the human personality and behavior, which I agree with to an extent. I would say that there are two main things that shape human behavior. The first, genetics. The second, socio-economic, cultural conditioning, our environment. So our behavior and our personality is shaped primarily by what's inside us, and secondarily by what's outside of us. And the two kind of work conversely, because depending on what's out there in the environment, given enough time, human beings can adapt to that environment. Their genetics will actually change, and because the environment favors genetics that make the organism fit to survive in that environment. That's the entire process of natural selection. That generally happens over very long periods of time. So this discussion, we're talking about human nature as it exists now. And it is my assertion that human behavior is the product mostly of genetics. And here's the analogy that I'm going to use for this. A computer, your hard drive. I would compare genetics in the human body to the actual hardware of the computer. Now, the hardware is what it is. It was built in the factory, and similarly, you came out of your mother's womb a certain way. You were given certain genetic traits and characteristics from your mom and your dad and from their parents, which is passed down through ancestral lineage. Those genetics make you who you are, and that's comparable to the hardware in a computer. There's also the software. Software is put onto a computer after the hardware is made. So the computer gets shipped out of the factory, and then someone will install usually Windows on it and the different drivers and different programs. I would compare the software on a computer to cultural and socio-economic conditioning factors in human existence. Now, the hardware is the main factor. It remains the same. It's static. It's the same blueprints for pretty much every computer, which is how human nature kind of is. But there's a certain amount of variance. There's different models of computers, different companies that make different kinds. But generally, they're all pretty much the same. But then you have the software. The software is installed on the computer. You can remove certain software. And that's kind of a good analogy to the human, the way we are. We have our genetic blueprint, which is like the hardware of a computer. And then we have our software, the cultural imprinting, the cultural and economic factors that shape who we are. I would say that genetics are primary, though. And socio-economic factors definitely shape who we are, but only to an extent. Now, with this conversation on genetics, what I don't understand for people like WonderWaz is they have a problem accepting this genetic determinism. I have many theories as to why they have a problem accepting it. But see, it doesn't really make sense, because what you're trying to do is make it seem as though genetics has very little, plays a very little role in determining human behavior and human personality. And that is simply not true. See, now when it comes to the human physical body, the color of our eyes, the color of our hair, how tall we are, how short we are, do we have a genetic predisposition to certain diseases? Was there heart disease or cancer in our family history? We know that physical characteristics, 100% of them, and you wouldn't deny this, no one would deny this, 100% of your physical characteristics are decided solely by genetics, right? So why would you think it's any different for the human behavior or personality? You're trying to create this kind of mind-body duality that doesn't exist. Your behavior, your personality, your mind, the way you act, your sense of humor, your temperament, your memory. All of these phenomena reside within your physical brain. Your physical brain is a part of your physical body, which, like any other aspect of your physical body, like your eyes or your hair, is shaped by genetics. So you can't, to use a metaphor, have your cake and eat it too. You know, I know, we all know that when it comes to our specific physical traits, like the examples I gave, no matter what it be, it's all genetics. It has to do with what our parents were like and what their parents were like, and certain hereditary traits that are passed down through family lineages. Yet you want to imagine that it's somehow different for personality. It is in the respect that we are shaped according to cultural and economic and social factors when we're children and when we're growing up. Obviously, we're going to have different cultural ethos and behaviors than a person who grows up in China or India does. That can vary, obviously, from person to person, but we all share this common hardwiring of genetics, and we all have certain genetic limitations and genetic variants that makes us the type of people we are. And I think it's a lot more, it plays a lot bigger role than you're giving it credit for. For example, well, this conversation started when Wonderwaz made the claim that homosexuality is not a genetic behavior, that it's caused by cultural conditioning. Now, I don't want to say that either way is true for every homosexual person. I don't know. But scientists, people who study genetics, have discovered a gay gene. And given what you've said about science in your comments in the past, I see that you don't place very much emphasis on the evidence. If that's the case, then, not to sound mean, but to hell with you. I can't talk rationally with someone who doesn't place any emphasis on the evidence. You either accept the evidence or you don't. But the evidence shows that there is literally a gay gene. Perhaps you've forgotten that the human genome has been mapped out and sequenced down to explicit detail. And so we know which genes exist in which human beings, and we can check for genetic variants and see that maybe some genes are the cause for certain behaviors in different human beings. And we have actually located a gay gene. We know this exists because people who are homosexual have genetic variants that straight people don't have. You could actually go into a lab, meet a scientist who studies this, and they could show you with your own eyes the genetic variants that causes a person to be gay. See, different genes cause different things to happen in the brain, whether an increase or a decrease of hormone, or an increase or decrease of serotonin, or different chemicals. It makes a person fundamentally different. And homosexuality is just one example of genetic variance that is found not just in human beings, but in the animal kingdom. If you want to continue to deny this and say that homosexuality is a result of only cultural conditioning, fine, deny it. But it's on you then to provide the evidence for your claim, since you're denying the evidence for the scientific side of this. Beyond homosexuality, we know of many specific behaviors that are directly attributable to genetics. For example, your hand skill. Some people are better with their hands than others. Scientists have studied this and determined that this is a genetic variance. Hand clasping patterns, the way that you fold your hands. Different people fold their hands in different ways, and believe it or not, the way you fold your hands is predetermined by genetics, and different families pass down a genetic variance that causes them to fold their hands in different ways. Not just hand folding, but arm folding, the way you fold your arms. Also, you may have noticed that some people have the ability to wiggle their ears. I can't do this. Why can some people do it? Genetic variance. Another example is tongue curling. Maybe you've seen people who curl their tongue to make it look like a hot dog bun. Why can they do that and others can't? Genetic variance. Another example, some people are more attuned to musical pitch and have a natural gift for this. Consider Beethoven and Bach. That's genetics. Stuttering in speech, genetics. Tobacco addiction. They've discovered specific genes that make some people more predisposed to tobacco addiction, not just smoking, but alcoholism. And again, homosexuality. These are all behaviors that can be specifically traced to genetic variants. After they mapped out the human genome in its entirety, They analyze different groups of people that have different abilities or different habits, and they compare these people to other people who don't have the same abilities and ask, what's the difference? And they look at the genome and isolate the exact part of the genome that is responsible for that specific genetic variance, whether homosexuality or being able to flap your ears. It's all genetics. And this is a field that's just opening up. We don't know all that much, though our knowledge of genetics is growing exponentially. And I expect that we will learn in the future, as we learn more about genetics, that a lot more of our behavior is directly attributable to genetic variance. And this is true for every other species and organism in the animal kingdom. So for you to think that it's not the same way for human beings is just downright silly. Surely we're also shaped by cultural, social, economic, religious factors. But the primary method of conditioning, the primary thing that makes us who we are, is genetics.